And the idea was that I would continue my undergrad and work in ministry there. But that all really fell through because I stopped caring about the things of God and started living a licentious lifestyle.
Well, welcome to City Square Podcast, where we talk with everyday people about faith and work. My name is Micah. My guest tonight is James Cross. He is a husband, father, and delivery driver in the DFW, Texas area. In his spare time, he enjoys memes, cigars, gaming with friends, and spending time with his family. How's it going, James?
It's a beautiful day. The fall weather has arrived, so it's nice and 50 or 60 degrees in the morning, which is very lovely.
That is lovely. I've enjoyed it quite a bit. I'm glad we could do this. Thanks for agreeing to it.
Yeah. Scheduling is always tricky, but we found a way to make it work.
Yeah, for sure. So let's start at the beginning then. Where did James Cross grow up?
Our family farm was in East Texas. And so since we weren't growing cotton, we ranched cattle, and from our ancestors, our grandparents, we had pecan orchards. And so the family business was ranching cattle, cutting hay as a service. So we would drive all over the county cutting different random fields of hay for profit. And then every winter was pecan harvest. And that was mechanized, but also manual labor, harvesting a bunch of nuts. And so the family joke is that we grew up on a nut farm.
A lot of people could claim for that. Could claim that, but not in the same way.
But he was able to make a lot of use of us because me and my three siblings were homeschooled. And so all the way from K through high school, we never saw a day of school until I got into college. And so we were able to take our school summer break for winter, which is when you harvest pecans, and then we do our schooling through the summer.
Gotcha. Was that like radically different from your friends in the area, or was everyone kind of on a similar schedule?
Something about this small town being about 2 hours away from DFW, and I only know it now. Growing up, I didn't realize it, but we had 50 some odd families in the county homeschooling their kids with a conservative evangelical background. And so we had co-ops, and we had all of our friends were homeschooled, and it just felt like this was normal life.
Did they follow that winter and summer flipped schedule too?
It's a mixed bag when you get that many homeschoolers together. You have people doing year-round education and just fewer hours per day, but also a lot more school excursions during the week. So they just spread it out throughout the year. There were several that were doing trade skills more than modern education. And then there were the classical educationists doing Latin and a lot of art and poetry. So it was a mixed bag, but it didn't make us feel left out or weird in any way.
Yeah, I was homeschooled too, so it was a good thing for those like co-ops and stuff, and you can connect with kids. Other than at least church. So you mentioned like conservative, evangelical. Is that the type of church you grew up in?
Mm-hmm. We went to one church my whole life because we never moved. We were always in the same place until I was in my early 20s and moved out of town. It was a splinter breakoff from a Wesley United Methodist, but the church was... They were called non-denominational, but it was basically a Bible church or a Baptist church, except that we would kneel for communion and the hymns were extra theologically sound.
Okay, so like holdover from conservative, like Methodism or something there. Interesting.
Yep.
Okay. Did you enjoy it then? Was it like a good experience, I'm guessing?
Very much so. Looking back, church was really me and my siblings' saving grace. Our cousins went there as well, but there was a good homeschool and also private Christian school influence at the church. That was basically all of the people that attended. And so family church was a big deal. You would attend Sunday school in age segregated groups, but then everybody would come together for big church. And so the Sunday service proper was families all sitting together except for infants and littles. And so every Sunday you heard the pastor and you sang with the congregation and saw communion.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, that's a style of church I go to, or at least in that area. I think that's really good. But that's not really the topic for tonight. That's just an aside. Well, I'm curious though. So what goes into pecan harvesting? And like, because I'm familiar with some farms. My mother grew up on a farm, so I'm familiar with some things, but they didn't have pecans. So I'm curious, like, what the duration is and all what goes into that harvest.
It is the most expensive hobby to get into. It's not a profitable business. And pecans belong in Georgia, not in East Texas. So, and also you have to, old dead people have to have left you trees to harvest. So my dad went to college for ag, and crossbreeding and selecting breeds of fruit trees is a big scientific area of study. And so when my parents got married, he planted a 3 or 4 acre grove of pecan trees as with a strain that he it's husbandry with animals, but I forget what it is with trees. But so that was, he's going to start his own orchard. And so I remember being like 18 and these trees are this big around and producing no fruit, because a pecan tree is a very long-lived tree. One of our most productive orchards. Every field is named after a family or an event, or so. This was the Lamb Orchard, LAMB. The original deed from 1872 marked out the boundary borders and marked out the pecan grove and the trees themselves. So we know that they at least were that old. And these suckers are 8 feet around. They're just gigantic trees, and they've been cultivated and farmed for their fruit the whole time. So it's a gorgeous place after harvest. We used mechanical harvesters. So one tractor would back up to the tree with a giant clamp on the back, and it would literally shake the tree. It's the PTO shaft comes out to an off-center weight, and so it clamps onto the tree and vibrates it. And that's when you get to watch the squirrels fall from 3 or 4 stories up, bounce off the ground, and scurry away. The ever-living scourge of a squirrel. So we always had free squirrel hunting if you ever wanted to come out, because they're expensive. They eat a lot of product. Wow. And then we had 2 mechanical harvesters that kind of look like a hay baler. They come off the tractor and then they're offset all to one side. And it just has a big barrel that rotates with big rubber fingers. And so it would sweep up everything off the ground, including, it's all clay. So the clay would get balled up into tiny little nuggets and go in too and act like a pecan. But all the leaves and branches and everything get thrown in, and it goes across 2 different conveyor belts with a big fan and then a sizing conveyor belt. So anything smaller than this would fall through into the bin, and then it would have to go on for processing. And so at the barn, we had large conveyor belts going through another fan blower and then a survey table. So during harvest time, you would start at 6:37 and you would process all the product that you harvested the day before. And you would stand at the conveyor belt and pick out things that are not pecans, or pecans that are not ready, or pecans that have got little bug holes called weevils in them, or clods of mud or stick. And so that'd take an hour or 2, and then you go out and harvest for the next morning.
So how many days, would you, for your size of land or whatever, how many days are you spending on that?
Yeah, we had 2 different plots. Each one was about 300 acres, but of trees, it was only about 125 or 150. And so pecans are only harvestable after the first hard overnight freeze because they have a green husk around the nut, and that doesn't die, shrivel up, and reveal the nut until it gets below freezing for the majority for when the sun's down. And so you grease up all the machinery, you gas everything up around Thanksgiving, and it's East Texas. You could wait halfway through December. You could wait a long time for the first freeze, and then it's go time. And then it's a big rush because once that husk comes off the nut, they tend to fall on the ground as well. And that's when squirrels and crows, we would have propane powered noise cannons. We call them crow guns, hanging all throughout the orchard. And it's just a timer, a barrel, and a spark plug from a car. And so every 20 minutes, it would let a little bit of propane into the barrel and then ignite it with the spark plug and make a big boom to scare the birds away.
Wow.
But if you get a flood, pecans float. So a flood is a bad time. And the pecan trees only grow in nutrient-rich floodplain around the Sabine River. And so the Sabine River snaked its way through our county, and the trees really just follow that because it's too dry otherwise in Texas for them to survive. But you would only get a harvest on average like 1 out of every 3 years.
Wow.
I'm just gonna keep. I can just keep going. Yeah, no, because it's a flower. In the springtime, it's a flower that needs to be pollinated on the tree. And so if there aren't enough insects, it won't get pollinated. If there's hail in a springtime, in a Texas springtime, the hail knocks the flower off the tree. If it's too dry in the summer, they shrivel up and they don't fruit well. And in the fall, if it's too muddy or if there's too much of a flood, they literally will float away.
I mean, I never knew pecans were so interesting, honestly. Most people think of
nobody really. Go ahead.
Good. I was going to say, most people think of farming. Oh, you're going to plant a tree and watch it grow. It's like there's like air cannons and mechanical shakers and all that stuff. That's crazy.
Yep. And each squirrel is about $50 worth of product over the course of 1 year. So if you kill a squirrel, you've saved $50 worth of product, of fruit. And so squirrels and crows were a big concern.
Wow. So,
and then grandma on the highway retailed shelled pecans or cracked pecans out of her driveway for probably 50 years. And so just everybody in the county and the surrounding counties knew Family Pecans, our last name, Cross and Cross Farms. You could just drive up. If the garage door is open, she'd have everything there and she would do retail out of her garage. And so they got to know everybody in the community. And then we would wholesale off the rest. And 18 they would come and just pick it up and it'd be gone.
Wow. So what did you expect to do when you were growing up, though? Did you expect you were going to be a farmer as well, or did your interest lie elsewhere?
Nobody picks pecan farming. It's just my parents inherited this from their parents, and you're stuck with a huge pecan processing equipment in a barn, all of the mechanized harvesting equipment, and the orchard itself, which is a huge capital investment. And it's like, well, I guess I'm going to do this, is kind of my dad went to college for ag. He loved farming, and it was a very expensive hobby for him. He carried the U.S. mail for 48 years. So out of college, he started carrying a rural route in East Texas. Every morning, he could get there as early as he wanted. So he'd show up to work at 3 or 4 a.m., sort his mail, carry the route, be done by 2 p.m., and then get to farm from 2 p.m. till after the sun goes down. But farming never paid enough to support a family. So he always had to work post office and get to do whatever farming he could.
Gotcha. Are you still harvesting pecans out there? Like your family anyway?
Yeah, they're trying. Yeah, my dad's out there, and two of my brothers are kind of working the farm, and we've got a cousin too. So it's a family enterprise. It's much reduced.
Gotcha. So you didn't feel called to go into con farming yourself?
No, at 20, I spent my first semester at the college in town that my parents went to and that everybody went to. And after one semester at that college, I couldn't take it. Every water fountain said no dip in the fountains. It was either half rodeo ag or half math. And I was too restless, and I didn't want, I mean, I thought I could do better. And so no, I said, I'm done. I'm out. It wasn't, it was an easy choice to make. So with him working the post office and the farm, by the time I was 14, pretty much in the summers, it was an 8-hour day cutting hay or raking hay or baling hay. So that's driving a tractor. And then all winter was pecan harvest. So it was a lot of rigorous, hard work. I like Mike Rowe. I'm a huge advocate for hard labor and trades and blue collar work. It did a lot for me, that I appreciate today. But by the time I was 18, 19, 20, I was ready to just go see the world and go have a Humspringer.
So what kind of person were you then in like high school, early college? Were you jock, nerd? I mean, you were not in the typical school environment. So you might not have had the same sort of opportunities as other kids, but at least in the stereotypical sense.
Correct. I have no idea what lunch table I would be sitting at, but I was I think geek is a good word for it, because nerd, we understand nerdy, and jock and prep, and I'm in my 30s now, so this was 90s, early 2000s was around this time. I was just a huge geek. I read every Star Wars expanded universe book that I could get my hands on. I played Star Wars games, but VBS at 9 years old is when I was professing faith. And then for 6 or 7 years, I was at the church 3 to 4 days out of the week, especially when I could drive. When I was 16, 17, when I could drive, we were doing Wednesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays, and Sunday programming at the church. And so that was really my major outlet for social interaction, personal growth, and loving the Lord. I just loved the Lord, so I wanted to do good stuff. But probably if you ask the people around, I was the church nerd, or holier than thou, way too zealous for his pants. Bible trivia know-it-all boy.
That sounds like someone I know. When I was a kid, anyway. Mm-hmm. So you said you went to school then in your town. You spent a semester there or a year there. What were you studying at the time?
I had aspirations for political science. For 3 or 4 years at that point, I was seminary bound. If you asked me, I was really following in my mentor's footsteps, the youth pastor at the church. Spent a lot of time investing in my life. And for those 6 years, he was getting his master's of theology from Dallas Theological Seminary. And so I was like, well, bless my boots, this sounds fantastic. This is exactly what I want. And so he's like, for your undergrad, do English, or you can find something you're interested in that a history would support that, religion. But political science always kind of interested me because I liked power and power dynamics and how people got where they were.
Gotcha. So, what happened? So, what happened after that? Where did you head off to once you decided to piece
Yeah,
out of?
it was a rocky road. Um, the farm life had us really dirt poor. I think food insecure is the clinical term for it. The paychecks were every 2 weeks, and so by the end of those 2 weeks, the groceries were running out. There wasn't much opportunity. Man, how did I get out? I did 2 years of community college dual enrollment while I was in high school. So I was taking full, like 16 credit hour semesters at a community college in DFW. And that was my first classroom experience, and it was very beneficial for me. It was a good time. It was a big culture shock going into the city and going into a community college environment. And so after 2 years of community college, I did one semester at the college there in home where everybody went to. And I was like, yeah, I'll get my political science degree from here. And after one semester of that, I said, oh, okay, maybe I should do something else. I had also gotten to see a bit of the world. My second cousin is a Alaskan commercial fisherman. And so they called me up in the summer and said, we need hands to go harvest fish. And I said, okay, is it like Deadliest Catch was the most popular thing on TV at that point. I was like, is it like Deadliest Catch? They're like, no, 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 no. It's much more tame. But I was just a kid and I had no idea what I was doing. And they said, yeah, come on. So it was Kodiak Island, Alaska for the summer and a bit of the fall. You lived in a cabin and you went out on a little dinghy every day and pulled the nets literally out of the water and grabbed the fish and put it in a bucket. And then you grabbed another fish and you put it in the bucket. And you did that until the net was empty. And you did that every time the net filled up. So you're going out 3 to 4 times a day for 2 to 3 hours at a time.
Wow.
So it was a grueling experience. It was a lot of fun. We went on 2 mission trips to Kenya. And so I spent, I think, 2 months. The second time was really just me and one pastor going to visit our missionary in Kenya. And so by 1920, I had seen a lot more of the world and my horizons had expanded. And so I got a roommate in Frisco and enrolled in University of Texas at Dallas. Yeah, and he was on the ministry team at the church in that town, and the idea was that I would continue my undergrad and work in ministry there. But that all really fell through because I stopped caring about the things of God and started living a licentious lifestyle, and got really got disinterested. Like I went and visited the church and met the team. I was like, yeah, I'll be an intern or I'll be on the ministry team and we'll do these things. But in my heart, I was just so disinterested in the whole process and the whole game.
What do you think what do you think was the change from being super connected in your hometown and in a matter, I don't know, was it a year or two or even months that change happened?
Yeah, it really didn't take long of moving out of my support network and realizing how much of my identity and how much of everything that I have ever done in my whole life, revolved around that one building and that one group of people. And growing up wasn't a really fun time. And looking back, I can see that a lot of adults in the church growing up I didn't realize it then, but they were purposefully like spending time with me. We were the poor family that needed charity, and the parents weren't doing a really good job. And so a lot of people came alongside. Several men at that church really stepped up and spent time with me and mentored me and taught me a lot of stuff. And I didn't realize how much they had poured into my life until I left the scene and said, "Oh, I'll just go live in a room in a rent house. I was a night clerk at the 7-Eleven overnight because that's how I paid my tuition the whole time, because I was the overnight clerks at gas stations trying to
Ooh.
pay for tuition and gas. And so I would work from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. and then roll into class and then take a nap and then try to go to work again. So I was working myself to death as well, trying to hold it all together. And so I got out there and I just real why am I killing myself? I don't have the money to go to college, and I'm not interested in this big corporate church that we're doing this thing with.
Hmm.
And so that kind of put me adrift.
Yeah. I think that's maybe not a typical story, but I'd say that seems to be common with people like straying for a while. Some people would accuse the sheltered backgrounds of being too sheltered. Do you feel that was the case with you, or is it something else?
We were not sheltered. We were isolated, but we were not sheltered. And so
Is that a
the
difference or kind of
TV was
distinction?
on pretty much. Well, sheltered, none of the transmissions getting through. Isolated, you're away from other people, but yet the transmissions of modern day culture are getting through. And so the
Yeah.
TV was on 24/7, and we had internet access of a sort at that time for whatever it was. And then, there were the private school kids at church that you would interact with. So um, if I were to meet me back then, yeah, you could say sheltered or isolated a bit, but we weren't cut off from the world, because we were also surrounded by the homeschool community that were flannel dresses, suspenders for the boys, no TV, no electronic devices, really. Very, very fundamentalist. And so we were quite liberal. We would watch The Simpsons and Friends and Home Improvement, and just we were partaking of modern day culture just without participating in it, I guess.
Hmm.
So seeing the world really helped, traveling to different places. But I was just ready I had all this energy to make something different of my life. And I didn't want to be on the farm. I didn't want to do what my parents did. I just needed to get out. And I watched like 30% of my friends. The only way out was the Navy, Air Force, Marines, National Guard. And I was like, nah, service was not for me. So I needed to kind of make my own way at that point.
Sure. So you were clerking overnight or at 7-Eleven or gas stations. Where'd you go after that?
I got a job at Kinko's on third shift. And this was back when, Kinko's was a copy retail location, and they were open 24 hours. And I was like, and they were desperate to hire people to work overnight. So I'm like, I have a great skill asset that you could acquire for the right price. And so I started overnights at Kinko's, which is it's retail, it's manufacturing, and it's shipping. So it's all three of those tied into one. So that gave me a place where I could work my way up. And that lasted for, I think, 6 years. So I spent a long time at Kinko's, but that was right about the time I met my wife, and started dating her as well. So I didn't make it long from out of home, and then I found my wife, moved on from there.
And I'm guessing she was quite a catch for you to achieve.
Yes. Oh, yes, yes. I aimed way above my caliber, or above my pay grade, or whatever you want to call it. But we met and started dating, and I was like, okay, nope, game's over. I didn't kiss dating goodbye, but I just didn't like the whole, why don't you run through 35 people to find out what you even like? Like, no, 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 no. That sounds like a lot of psychological trauma. Even at that young age, I was like, nah, I don't want to do my parents aren't going to arrange a marriage with somebody else, so I can't kiss dating goodbye. But, I was on the hunt for a wife from a very early, at 21. At 21, I was like, okay, how do I find a wife? Because this is ridiculous. I need to start my life and just get it moving.
What did you do after Kinko's? Where'd you go after that?
I was, yeah, I moved different branches. We were married at that point, and then I needed more income. I needed to move around a bit, so I quit and I tried a stint at project management for one of these big corporate conglomerates where you're assigned various interests. And I was like, project management, that sounds great. At that point, I was in middle management of um, press production or digital press working for Kinko's. And so I was managing larger print orders and more logistical things. And so I tried some contract jobs as a project manager to see if I could make it happen there. But it was a good breather, but it wasn't really for me. And I was a little ignorant of how contract jobs worked. And so he tried to dissuade me at the interview. His name was Jack Daniels. His name was Jack Daniels. And so he interviewed me and he's like, you understand that you've got tenure at this company and this is contract. So like when the contract's done, you don't have a job. Other contracts come along. I'm like, yeah, no, it sounds great. I'm just so young and so eager. It's going to be a good time. Let's do it. And so I got my cubicle and I got my laptop and I did the project management thing. And funny enough, I was managing the installation of copy machines in corporate businesses. So I'm still moving copiers around. But that was only 6 months. The latter half was working at home, which was very nice. And I said, this is terrible. And I reapplied to Kinko's, which at that time is rebranded as FedEx Office, but it's the same company. FedEx just bought Kinko's. So they're still retail, ship, print centers. It's just it was Kinko's and now it's FedEx Office. And so I reapplied, but we had moved further north. So I was with a new district manager and I had left on good terms. So I spent another 5 years back at FedEx Office.
Gotcha. So you're a delivery driver now. How do you get from like project management or like middle management in, printing and shipping companies to a delivery driver? It seems like quite a shift.
A world pandemic.
Oh yeah.
That really kind of picks up the carpet and shakes everything around. I was with a small company for 3 years doing digital document management solutions, where literally a dump truck would come in, dump paper of medical records off, and we would run it through machines and digitize it. And so we were having a good time. I liked that job. No customers. It was all just sort of closed house production. It was like a manufacturing job. And I was managing that site. But COVID came along and it was a smaller business. And so they just said, we're out. And so I spent, was it 6 or 9 months unemployed at home, hanging out with the kids, just desperately applying for a job as no one was hiring. And so the first place that hired me was a supply warehouse that needs a wholesale delivery driver. And so I'm driving a 30-foot box truck to construction sites and hand unloading materials. And I said, thank you, God. I'm very happy for a job to provide for my family. And it's been over 2 years now. And I realized that I really like it. And it's a really good time.
That's good. That's going from, essentially a desk job, not completely maybe, but essentially a desk job to like driving and then hand delivering stuff. Was that like a big adjustment?
Well, it felt like returning back to farm work where I used my physical body to get the day's work done. And we start at 4 a.m. and it goes until the work is done, which is usually 5 or 6 p.m. And so it's really long hours, but it's really rewarding. The camaraderie of a 99% male work environment is fantastic. And there's a lot of enjoyment to be found if you um, apply yourself and find joy in working as unto the Lord. You can just say, hey, I'm providing for my family. This is a good time.
Yeah. So you moved to DFW. You've worked a series of different jobs. And it seems like you're in a different spot now when it comes to your faith than you were like upon arrival here or in DFW. Spoiler alert, I'm in DFW too. Um, so what was the change there? How long did it take you to, or how long did it take you to come to where you are now? And where is that now?
I think it was about 5 years, but there wasn't just a lightning bolt. So it was a gradient coming back. It was a gradient sort of, um, falling away from the things of God, and it was a gradient coming back, but it was about 5 years. And in the middle of it, I do have one solid memory of just sitting there in the apartment, and I'm like, yeah, I'm looking at my bookcase of all the books that I've hauled with me from high school and college, and there's all these religious books, and I'm like, yeah, I don't really feel like I need Jesus or to do all that Christian stuff at this point. Let me edit that. I don't feel like I need to do all this institutional Christian stuff. I don't think I ever really rejected Jesus or the word of the cross, but I had invested so much time into the church, and I was just so burnt out with it and not wanting, I was disinterested in ministry. And so that also really affected my faith. But my life completely fell apart and fell off the wheels with depression and alcohol abuse. And it was not a good time. I was pretty much drinking every day just to get by. Our marriage was in shambles. My wife had drawn up papers, and they held an intervention to say, move out because you're not a good husband and this is not going well. But a few months prior, because my wife had started attending a church here again. So we had both met and married at the same point in our lives where we were exhausted. She had spent so much of her time, volunteering and doing stuff at church, just all church, all church, all church, all church. And we reinforced each other by saying, "Oh, let's just do us. Let's just be greedy and not do all of that, and try to." It's also identity forming as young people. It's like, well, let's try to set up a new identity. Who are we as people now outside of the church? Yeah. Especially the ones that we grew up in. And so with that wake up call, we went to counseling, but man, Jordan Peterson really just sunk his lobster claws in me. And I understand the merit of what he has to say today, and that you have to really take it with a grain of salt, and that he is a pagan trying to look at the things of God. But I listened to everything he had to say. Like, I remember the night I was on the internet and it was being posted, hey, today a protest happened at this like the first time you saw Jordan Peterson ever. It was right there wearing suspenders with weird communists on the college campus yelling at him. I'm like, who's this guy? He seems interesting. And I always liked psychology. And so going back and watching everything on his YouTube channel, from the Maps of Meaning and his just psychology courses, really had me trying to sort myself out and clean up my room, buckaroo. And so that really encouraged me to attend the recovery ministry at the church that my wife was attending. She would go to a small group every Wednesday, and I would take our newborn daughter to the child care at the recovery ministry every Wednesday for the chemical addictions group. And that was quite a blessing, and it really served me and my life and my family, and we're super thankful for it. At a certain point, you kind of graduate out from that, and we have been plugged into a small group, the same church, pretty much ever since.
That's awesome.
But it was never really a light. Go ahead.
No, keep going.
there was never really a lightning bolt. Oh, I am now going to do all the things that I was taught and that are wise, and I'm going to listen to everybody who ever poured into my life. But it was this sort of gradient coming back because
Yeah.
I had done a lot of soul damage and damaging things to me and to my wife, and we were not in a good place. And so it was a long road of recovery, and that's it's a great name for it because we
Yeah.
did it did take some time to recover from that.
I see that kind of story because I'm, familiar with Jordan Peterson. I don't think I've watched everything he's done, but certainly appreciate, the good things I've seen from him. That seems to be a common theme I see in the comments on his videos very often. Oh, I came back to the church because of you, or I got my life together because of you, or whatever. And it's like, man, praise the Lord that, he draws straight lines with crooked sticks, and sometimes you just need somebody else to say the things you've already heard in order to hear them again correctly. So that's fascinating. I think even if he's not a believer, he's still been used of God a lot. So you grew up in a Bible church that was like an offshoot of a Methodist. Are you in a similar tradition, or are you in the same sort of? What's the
I
general
haven't
flavor of the
changed.
church?
I haven't changed, but the world has changed around me. So when I was a bit of a growing up, the Southern Baptists, we looked our nose down on them because they were too conservative with no music and no dancing and no alcohol. But
Okay.
now so they growing up, Southern Baptists were the weirdos. They were too conservative. They were fundamentalists, and there's still a bit of that Methodist liberalism hanging around. But now, as an adult, I kind of hold still the same theological basis for my framework. And now I'm Southern Baptist. So Southern Baptist has drifted to where I am now, which, is far more liberal than it used to be. And
Yeah.
I'm sure in 20 years, I'm going to hopefully stay here, and Southern Baptist will continue to move more liberal. And and even now, I sometimes refer to myself as reformed because Southern Baptist is even kind of sliding ever onwards towards liberalism.
Yeah, it does seem like that, at least in some areas for sure. So so the church you're in now is a Southern Baptist church. Was that your first exposure to Southern Baptist, like
Mm-hmm.
attending regularly? Okay.
Yeah, and I'm in my mid 30s now, and I had never addressed the question: what church should I go to? When do you leave a church? And how does one handle disagreements with a local body? Not like a specific disagreement, but like a holistic that the whole doctrinal statement and the congregation are all moving in this direction. And when do you as a person say, I'm going to fight for this, or for our safety and well-being we need to go? I had never, because I was at one church growing up, I moved, and now I'm here, and the recovery ministry at this church helped us, and so we've been there for 5 or 6 years ever since.
Yeah.
And those questions come up, and I forgot your question.
Me too. What do you think is the biggest strength in?
I just got started on my story.
Yeah. What do you think the biggest strength is of your the tradition you're in? Like, so you're in Southern Baptist, and you said reform. You're personally
Mm-hmm.
reformed in some ways. What would you say is like the biggest strength of that, or the part you appreciate the most?
And it was what my mentor was going through as I was in junior high and high school for Dallas Theological Seminary, and it's the academic rigor and the class of theology that is brought to the table. That serious academic thought is put towards the things of faith. And so I am always trying to get into the nitty gritty and listening to seminars and lectures and the depth that is there. I think would be what really appeals to me of the tradition.
Gotcha. So I've got a lightning round for you. And they're not one answer questions necessarily. So take whatever you want from them. What is on your current reading list?
Orthodoxy by G.K. Chesterton. But it came sandwiched with two others because there's Heretics, Orthodoxy, and another one. But I bought a Chesterton book that I'd read Orthodoxy in high school, and so I bought it again. And I think I'm halfway through the first part of Heretics.
Nice. That's a good choice.
And I'm a truck driver, and so I have a lot of hours with auditory available, and I'm a huge audiophile for content. And so I'm listening to John Gershner go through the Westminster Confession chapters right now. And so that's not a published work, but it's John Gershner going through the Westminster Confession, and it's riveting.
Gotcha. So lots of theological interest. And do you switch it up with fiction, nonfiction, other genres as well?
The sci-fi fantasy is my wheelhouse. So I did Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan, Sword of Truth by Terry Goodkind. We just went through. I just got introduced to Terry Pratchett and the Discworld novels, and so that is just an absolute hoot because I'm reading Isaac Asimov or Arthur C. Clarke, hard sci-fi and fantasy, and then all of a sudden Terry Pratchett comes along with this dry British humor. It's so much like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and it tickles every funny bone because I also play D&D, and it's all this funny stuff. The barbarian hero at the end of his career is broke because every time he saves a princess, she sues him for alimony. It's hilarity over and over again.
I need to put those on my list. I think I've heard of them. I've heard of them from other friends.
Yeah. Just read The Name of the Wind. That was another one that was highly recommended. Dune recently for the first time. But hard sci-fi, fantasy, and then as much theology as I can stomach.
Gotcha. What Bible versions do you use?
I'm an NIV exclusivist, and it's a character flaw. I am working to be redeemed in my choice of translation. I am suffering from the sunk cost fallacy, is that everything in my brain is in NIV words. And so I don't want to do the switch over. It's like when everybody looked at their watch and had to go, oh, we're going from BC to AD. I have to get a new watch now. So I find the NIV to be more than adequate. I find it to be faithful. But you do have to be made aware of the interpretations biases. And so I think with being informed on the biases of those translators, that it is a more than adequate tool.
Gotcha. Do you dip into any other ones for Bible study or mainly?
We read ESV all the time, and that's what our church uses. And I find that to be a very faithful translation. But it's either NIV or ESV.
Gotcha. That was the version that your church used?
Yes, it's been NIV my whole life, and that's why it's such a sunk cost. Okay. And it's like every time I can go through it, and it's so familiar. And then I pick up an ESV. I tried an ESV. I tried it. It's not like I don't want to do this, but I find I don't want to do what I do, but I do it anyway. And I pick up an ESV, and it has different cadence. It has different flow because it's translation versus transliteration. And so I've got all the memory verses in NIV. What do you want me to do? I can't translate my brain.
Yeah. I grew up in the King James mainly, so I still have a lot of those verses that I have memorized are still kind of primarily in KJV English. So it's just the opposite problem. Yes. Who art thou, O man? Um, that's cool. So, what do you do for fun outside of work? In
Once a week, I am always getting together with friends to either smoke cigars or play Dungeons and Dragons or tabletop RPG games. And so I used to be a big PC gamer, but I haven't played hardly any PC games in the past decade. It's all been traded for pen and paper and dice on a tabletop and slaying dragons or doing fun Jedi stuff. Because hanging out with people I enjoy is so rewarding. So that pretty much takes up all. If I have free time, I want to be doing that.
I Another friend of mine was referring to one of his last characters played. It was a barbarian named Squog, and Squog didn't like the dwarf in his party. So, and he was, I don't remember the whole conversation now, but it was freaking hilarious. And I told him about a barbarian that I played named Tool, and we were just laughing it up because I think he lives in Michigan and I live in Texas, and we were, just kind of laughing about how similar they were. Is there a memorable character that you have, like your most memorable RPG or D&D character?
Oh, of course. It has to be the Holy Paladin Hume, because I was reading Hume's philosophy and a lot of Michael Crichton at the time. And so my righteous paladin dealing out justice and violence to take Jerusalem again it was a hoot. And it's a lot of fun to ham it up and to play a character and to spend time with your friends doing it. So Hume was so much fun.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Any memorable stories?
Oh, when he decided to double wield two-handed swords, one of which was the focus for a necromancer, and the DM's like, "Oh, it'll be fine." And we were killing angels and demons left and right because it was the whole heavenly war against us, and so it was just a blast.
Wow, that sounds fun. Hey man, I really appreciate
it. It came up. I was getting pulled into a pool of poisonous water by a slug monster, and the warlock, who hasn't been doing much, just banished it and used the spell and then said, "Oh, I'm going to dimension door 300 feet away." And so the DM had to say, "Okay, I guess the encounter's over."
Wah, wah, wah.
Wah, wah, wah.
Wow. That's awesome. Well, I really appreciate you doing this. Thanks for joining.
Oh, it was a good time. I think my first podcast went well. I think it went fantastic.
I think so too. And thank you everyone for joining us. If you enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to like the video. And if you'd like to see more content like this, please hit that subscribe button. We're going to release a new podcast every week. If you really, really want to know when our content goes live, you can click the little notification bell, and you'll get a notification on your app on your phone or in your email when we upload another video. In the meantime, thanks for joining. Until next time, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you his peace. We'll see you guys later.